When a wealthy cowboy, bleeding and desperate, pounds on what he thinks is a doctor's door in the dead of night, he has no idea he's stumbled upon a rundown trailer belonging to a struggling single mother. But sometimes fate has a way of putting people exactly where they need to be. What starts as a case of mistaken identity becomes a story that will challenge everything both of them believe about worth, redemption, and second chances. The storm that swept across the Texas plains that October night was the kind that made even seasoned ranchers seek shelter and pray for morning. Lightning split the sky like God's own whip, illuminating the sprawling Blackwood Ranch, 10,000 acres of prime cattle land owned by Jackson Blackwood, a man whose name carried weight from Dallas to Denver. Jackson had built his empire from nothing, starting with a single horse and a dream 40 years ago. Now, at 62, he owned more land than some small towns, employed over 100 people. The address he clutched in his trembling hand: Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, 1247 Creek Road, was supposed to be his salvation. Instead of 1247 Creek Road, he was standing in front of 1274 Creek Road, a beat-up single-wide trailer with peeling paint and a sagging porch that looked like it might collapse under the weight of his boots. Nobody came calling at midnight in weather like this unless trouble followed close behind. But when she peered through the rain-streaked window and saw a man collapse on her porch, bleeding and barely conscious, her nursing instincts from her abandoned dreams kicked in. Doc Morrison had saved his life twice before, once from a rattlesnake bite and another time from pneumonia, and she was the only person he trusted to treat a gunshot wound without asking too many questions. Played quietly with a deck of cards, their only entertainment since she had to sell the TV last month to pay for Sophia's school supplies, and had a bank account that could buy and sell most of his neighbors twice over. But you're hurt bad. Let me help you. But on this night, none of that wealth could save him from the bullet wound in his chest or the fever that was slowly burning through his body. This wasn't the gray-haired country doctor he expected, but a young woman with calloused hands and worry lines around her eyes. Now lie still while I see what we're dealing with. At 35, she looked older, worn down by years of working double shifts at the diner while raising her 2 children alone. Her ex-husband had left them with nothing but debts and broken promises 3 years ago, and every month was a struggle to keep the lights on and food on the table. His truck had broken down 15 miles from town, and with his cell phone dead and no other option, he'd been walking for hours through the driving rain. What Jackson didn't realize, in his delirium and desperation, was that he'd misread the faded numbers on the rural mailbox in the darkness. Inside the trailer, Maria Santos was trying to stretch a can of soup into dinner for 3. Her daughter Sophia, 15, was bent over her homework at the kitchen table, while her son Diego, 12, when the desperate pounding started on her door. Maria's first instinct was fear. "Sophia, take your brother to the back room and stay there," she commanded, grabbing a towel and rushing to the door. The man who fell into her arms was unlike anyone who'd ever stepped foot in her world. Expensive boots, a hand-tooled leather belt with a silver buckle the size of a dinner plate, and even through the blood and rain, she could tell his clothes cost more than she made in 6 months. "Doc Morrison," he mumbled through chattering teeth. Need Doc Morrison ... "I'm not Doc Morrison," Maria said gently, helping him to her worn sofa. Jackson's eyes focused on her face for the first time. Kind brown eyes in a face marked by hardship, but not hardened by it. "Wrong house," he whispered, trying to stand. "I'm sorry, The only wrong thing would be letting you bleed to death on my porch," Maria said firmly. As Maria cut away Jackson's blood-soaked shirt with kitchen scissors, she tried to keep her hands steady despite the shock of what she was seeing. The bullet had entered just below his left shoulder, and while it didn't appear to have hit any major organs, he was losing blood fast and running a dangerous fever. "This needs proper medical attention," she said, reaching for her phone. I'm calling an ambulance." Jackson's hand shot out, gripping her wrist with surprising strength for someone so injured. "No hospitals, no doctors. Please. You could die." His blue eyes, even clouded with pain, held a desperation that made her pause. "There are people looking for me. Bad people. If they find me in a hospital, ... The truth was, he discovered that his trusted foreman, Pete Hutchins, had been running drugs through his ranch for over 2 years, using cattle shipments to transport product across state lines. When Jackson confronted him, Pete had pulled a gun, and in the struggle, Jackson had been shot. Pete was probably telling everyone that the boss had gone crazy, maybe even that he was the one running drugs. Better than the alternative. Maria stared at him, trying to reconcile this expensive-looking man with talk of dangerous enemies. "What kind of trouble are you in?" Jackson closed his eyes, debating how much to tell her. "My business partner tried to kill me tonight," he said simply. Maria's voice held a mixture of pride and worry. "Sophia's got straight A's and wants to be a doctor someday. Diego's got a gift for numbers, already doing high school math." Here was a woman who had every reason to be bitter, to give up. Yet she spoke about her children's futures as if they were certainties rather than impossible dreams. "If I go to a hospital, he'll finish the job." Maria's mind raced. "We'll find a way. We always do. But I'm not a doctor. I'm just a waitress who took a few nursing classes." She had basic first aid knowledge from her brief time in nursing school before life had forced her to drop out. But removing a bullet was far beyond her capabilities. He'd known men like that. Selfish, weak. The kind who ran when things got difficult instead of fighting for their families. Her nails were short and practical. No rings except for a simple wedding band she still wore. Yet looking at this man's face, she saw something that reminded her of her own desperation when she'd had nowhere else to turn. Maria's tone closed off that line of questioning. "Before my husband left and I had to drop out to support my kids. I can clean the wound and try to stop the bleeding," she said finally. The furniture was worn but clean, the walls decorated with children's artwork and school awards. A photograph on the side table showed Maria with 2 kids, all of them smiling despite their obvious poverty. "Right now, you're an angel," Jackson said, managing a weak smile. As Maria worked by the light of her kitchen lamp, cleaning the wound as best she could, Jackson found himself studying her trailer home. "Your children?" he asked. "Sophia and Diego. They're good kids. I know you're risking your safety to help someone you've never met. I know you raising 2 kids alone and still talking about their dreams like they were going to come true." He paused, meeting her eyes. "I know you a better person than most people I've met in 62 years of living. College is expensive," Jackson observed. Maria's hands paused in their work. The simple confidence in her voice moved something in Jackson's chest that had nothing to do with his injury. What about their father? Not in the picture. As she worked to bandage his wound, Jackson noticed her hands, strong, capable, but marked with small scars and calluses that spoke of hard physical labor. "You're very skilled for someone who's just a waitress," he said. "I was in nursing school before ... She trailed off, then seemed to decide he deserved honesty since she was literally holding his life in her hands. The bitterness that finally crept into her voice made Jackson's jaw tighten. "His loss," Jackson said quietly. Maria looked up, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. "You don't know anything about me. I know you opened your door to a bleeding stranger in the middle of a storm." By dawn, Jackson's fever had broken, and Maria had managed to get some broth and water into him. She'd spent the night dozing in the chair beside the couch, waking every hour to check on him, while her children slept unaware of the drama unfolding in their living room. As morning light filtered through the thin curtains, Jackson got his first clear look at the woman who had saved his life. Maria Santos was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with expensive clothes or makeup. There was a strength in her features, a resilience that spoke of battles fought and won, even when the odds were stacked against her. "I need to make some calls," he said, trying to sit up. "You need to rest. That wound could still get infected, and you've lost a lot of blood. Pete Hutchins shot me last night. I have proof he's been running drugs through the ranch. I'm somewhere safe, but I need you to start damage control. I owe you an explanation." Jackson pulled out his phone, relieved to find it was working again after drying out overnight. Everyone in 3 counties knew about Blackwood Ranch. It was practically a small city unto itself, employing half the region and generating millions in revenue. She'd served Jackson Blackwood coffee at the diner dozens of times over the years. Maria from Mays? But you look so different, ... But he'd never really looked at her, never seen her as anything more than part of the background. His first call was to his lawyer, Tom Bradley, the only person he trusted completely. "Tom, I need you to listen carefully and don't ask questions right now." Maria listened to his conversation with growing alarm. Drug running, attempted murder, corrupt business partners. What kind of world did this man live in? He'd been blind to the individual struggles of people like Maria. People who served him, who made his comfortable life possible, but who remained invisible to him. After several more calls, Jackson hung up and turned to her. "You don't owe me anything except maybe a promise to see a real doctor soon." At 15, she had her mother's dark eyes, but with a sharpness that spoke of intelligence and curiosity. "My name is Jackson Blackwood. I own the Blackwood Ranch. Maybe you've heard of it. But medical school is expensive, and we ... He was hurt in an accident last night. Sophia, what would you say if I told you that smart, determined people like you are exactly what the world needs more of?" Maria's eyes widened. "You've been coming to May's Diner for years," she said quietly. "I've been your waitress. Smart and practical. I like that. To thank you for saving my life." Jackson stared at her, trying to reconcile this revelation. What if Diego could have access to the best tutors and educational opportunities? Just Jackson is fine. "Your mother tells me you want to be a doctor. People look different when they're not wearing a uniform and carrying coffee," she said with a slight edge to her voice. The shame that washed over Jackson's features was immediate and genuine. "I'm sorry. I should have. I never really saw you." Rich people rarely do. Despite their poverty, despite the constant struggle, there was a richness in this small trailer that his mansion had never contained. When Jackson asked him about his interest in mathematics, the boy's face lit up as he began explaining a complex problem he'd been working on. Her words stung because they were true. Jackson realized that despite all his success, despite thinking of himself as a good man who treated his employees well, "You're right," he said simply. "I'm sorry for that too." Sophia appeared in the doorway, drawn by the sound of voices. "Mom, who is this man?" "Sophia, this is Mr. Blackwood." Sophia's eyes went wide. "The Mr. Blackwood? From the ranch?" Jackson managed a smile. "More than anything," Sophia said, stepping closer. "Sophia," Maria warned. "It's okay," Jackson said. "I'd say determination doesn't pay for textbooks," Sophia replied with a maturity beyond her years. Jackson laughed despite his pain. Diego peeked around the corner, curious about the stranger in their house. Watching Maria with her children, Jackson saw something he'd never experienced in his own life. A family bound together not by wealth or obligation, but by genuine love and mutual support. "Maria," he said when the children had gone to get ready for school, "I want to do something for your family." "That's not necessary." "It is to me. What if I told you there was a way for Sophia to go to medical school without worrying about money?" Maria's expression grew guarded. "What would you want in return?" The question cut deep, because Jackson realized she had every reason to be suspicious of wealthy men making promises. Her experience had taught her that nothing came free. "Nothing," he said. Absolutely nothing except maybe the chance to prove that not all rich people are selfish bastards. 3 days later, Jackson was strong enough to make phone calls from Maria's kitchen table, coordinating with his lawyer and trusted ranch hands to expose Pete Hutchins' drug operation. The FBI had been brought in, and evidence was mounting that would clear Jackson's name and put Pete behind bars for a very long time. But as Jackson's legal troubles resolved, a different kind of tension was building in the small trailer. Word had somehow gotten out that Jackson Blackwood was staying with the Santos family, and the gossip mill in their small community was working overtime. Maria returned from her shift at the diner with red eyes and tight lips. "People are talking," she said without preamble. "What kind of talking?" "The kind where they assume a rich man doesn't stay with a poor woman for innocent reasons." Maria's voice was steady, but Jackson could see the hurt underneath. Jackson's jaw clenched. "What exactly are they saying?" "Does it matter? The damage is done." Sophia came home from school crying because some girls were making comments about her mother and the rich rancher. "Tonight, I'll get a hotel room in town." The guilt hit Jackson like a physical blow. In trying to repay Maria's kindness, he'd inadvertently made her life harder. "I'll leave." "You'll do no such thing. You're still recovering, and besides, running away would just confirm what they're whispering about. We face it head on." She opened her home to a stranger, risked her own safety, and asked for nothing in return. "While I was recovering, I got to know her and her children, and I learned something important. I learned that a single mother working double shifts to put her kids through school has more class than most people born to privilege. And I learned that true generosity comes from people who have the least to give. Together. Then, what do you suggest? It is not charity. It is an investment in the future of two remarkable young people, and a small repayment for a debt I can never fully settle." Maria sat down across from him, her expression resolute. "Maria Santos, Sophia, and Diego. This family represents everything good about our community. The Blackwood Foundation will provide scholarships, medical assistance, and support services for working families throughout the region." "Jackson, I don't know anything about running a foundation. I need someone who understands what it means to struggle, someone who knows which families truly need help and how to provide it with dignity. You know the difference between a hand up and a handout. You know what it feels like to wonder if you'll make rent this month. Sophia wants to be a doctor, and Diego has mathematical gifts that shouldn't be wasted because of economic circumstances." The boy who loved mathematics was already calculating how many families they could help, while the girl who dreamed of being a doctor was envisioning the impact she could have on her community. He called a town meeting at the community center, asking Maria to stand beside him as he addressed the crowd. Pete Hutchins' brother Earl was glaring at Jackson with undisguised hatred, and Maria noticed several other faces that looked more resentful than happy about this turn of events. "You know, I built my success through hard work and treating people fairly. But doing the right thing isn't about popularity contests." The documents inside established a trust fund worth over $2 million, managed by Jackson's lawyer, with strict provisions ensuring the money could only be used for educational purposes. 3 nights ago, I was shot by someone I trusted, and I ended up at Maria Santos' door by mistake, or maybe by providence. That evening, Jackson made an announcement that surprised everyone, including Maria. "Many of you know me," he began, looking out at the faces of ranchers, shopkeepers, and working families. He paused, glancing at Maria. "This woman saved my life." The crowd was silent, hanging on his words. "I learned that wealth isn't measured in dollars or acres." Jackson reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. He handed the envelope to Maria. "This is an irrevocable trust fund that will pay for both children's education through college and beyond." Maria's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. "I can't accept this," she whispered. "You're not accepting it. Your children are earning it by being exactly who they are: brilliant, kind, determined kids who deserve every opportunity to succeed. The community center erupted in applause, but Jackson wasn't finished. There's one more thing. Maria, I'm offering you a job as the manager of my new community outreach program. Maria stared at him, overwhelmed. You know everything that matters. You know how to help people without making them feel small. Sofia and Diego, who had been standing with their mother, looked like they were watching a fairy tale come to life. But in the back of the room, not everyone was celebrating. Some people aren't pleased about this, she murmured to Jackson as they left the meeting. Change is never popular with everyone, Jackson replied. As they walked back to Maria's trailer under the stars, both of them knew that this was just the beginning of something that would challenge everything they thought they knew about themselves and each other. 2 weeks later, just as Maria was settling into her new role at the Blackwood Foundation, and the children were adjusting to their dramatically changed circumstances, the phone call came that would test everything they'd built together. Jackson was at the foundation office, reviewing applications for their first round of family assistance grants, when his lawyer Tom Bradley burst through the door with a grim expression. We've got a problem, Jack. A big one. What kind of problem? The FBI investigation into Pete Hutchins has turned up something unexpected. They found evidence that suggests you might have been involved in the drug operation after all. Someone has been very clever about making it appear that you were the mastermind, and Pete was just a fall guy who got nervous and tried to eliminate you. That's impossible. You know, Pete set me up. Jackson's blood ran cold. I know that, and you know that, but planted evidence has a way of looking very convincing to federal prosecutors. By evening, arrest warrants had been issued, and Jackson was facing the very real possibility of spending the rest of his life in prison. The next few hours were a nightmare of legal maneuvering, emergency meetings, and the awful realization that someone with significant resources and connections was orchestrating Jackson's downfall. 3 weeks ago, I thought I knew who I was and what my life was going to be like. Now everything's changed, and I'm wondering if any of it was real. You need to disappear, Tom urged. Get out of the country while I work on this from the legal angle. He found her waiting on the porch, having already heard the news through the community grapevine. But Jackson surprised everyone by driving straight to Maria's trailer instead of fleeing. All of his assets would be frozen, including the foundation and the Children's Education Fund. Your worth, your intelligence, your futures, none of that depends on my money. You are remarkable people with or without any help from me. They're saying you're a drug dealer, she said quietly. Do you believe them? Maria studied his face in the porch light, searching for any sign of deception. I don't know what to believe anymore. The only thing that's fake is the evidence someone has manufactured to destroy me. I'll never be able to help your family or anyone else. Jackson sat down beside her on the porch steps. It was all real, Maria. Every moment, every conversation, every feeling. If you're guilty, ... She paused, meeting his eyes. Then I've been a fool. And my children don't need to learn that being foolish has consequences. Who would do something like that? I have suspicions, but no proof. Yet. Stay and fight, and if you're truly innocent, the truth will come out. People will say you were complicit, that you helped a criminal. It was a leap of faith that could cost him his freedom, his fortune, and possibly his life. I've been dealing with gossip and judgment my whole life. Sofia and Diego appeared in the doorway, their faces reflecting the confusion and fear that comes when the adults in your life are in crisis. Are we going to lose everything? Sofia asked bluntly. Then maybe we'll all learn something about what it means to have faith in someone. Jackson looked at the trust documents Tom had brought him, papers that would become worthless if he was convicted of federal drug charges. He would stay and face whatever came next, not because he was sure of victory, but because a woman who had every reason to doubt him had asked him to prove himself worthy of her faith. But Maria, I need you to know, whatever happens to me, whatever they take away from me, These past few weeks with you and your family have been the best of my life. I should never have let them get attached to the idea of a different life." "I don't know," he answered honestly, "but I want you both to understand something. A medical school—" Sophia's voice trailed off. "Will happen somehow, some way. I promise you that." Maria stood up abruptly. "I think you should go." Jackson felt like he'd been punched. Maria ... No, listen to me. If you're innocent and someone powerful wants you destroyed, and being around us puts my children in danger. And if I'm innocent and I run, I'll never be able to prove it. That's not our problem to solve." Jackson stood slowly, understanding her position, even as it broke his heart. "You're protecting your children. I respect that. I'm protecting them from hoping for something that might disappear overnight. But what if that different life is still possible? Then prove it," Maria said firmly. "Don't run away like a guilty man." Jackson stared at her, realizing she was asking him to risk everything on the belief that justice would prevail. "If I stay and fight and I lose, you and the children will be caught in the fallout. Let me worry about what people say. And if I stay and win?" Maria's expression softened for the first time that evening. Jackson nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll stay." As police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer, Jackson Blackwood made the decision that would define the rest of his story. The trial of Jackson Blackwood became the biggest news story in Texas in decades. The prosecution painted him as a wealthy rancher who had used his legitimate business to cover massive drug trafficking operations, while the defense maintained he was the victim of an elaborate frame-up by his trusted foreman and unknown co-conspirators. Throughout the 6-month legal ordeal, Maria Santos made a decision that shocked everyone who knew her. Their presence was a statement of faith that didn't go unnoticed by the jury or the media. Despite the social pressure, the whispers and accusations, and the very real possibility that Jackson was guilty, she stood by him. Earl had used Pete to implement the scheme on Jackson's ranch. Then when Pete got nervous about discovery, Earl had orchestrated both the attempt on Jackson's life and the subsequent frame-up. Not as a romantic partner. Their relationship remained carefully platonic, but as someone who had looked into his eyes and believed she saw truth. Pete, facing life in prison without possibility of parole, finally told the truth about his brother's operation and Jackson's complete innocence. Maria asked as they drove back to her trailer. Every day of the trial, Maria sat in the courtroom, often bringing Sophia and Diego when they weren't in school. The foundation, the scholarships, all of it. But first, I owe you an apology. Jackson, do you remember what you said that first night about fate putting people where they need to be? Earl had connections with federal agents who had helped plant false evidence, and he had been systematically siphoning money from the drug profits to buy silence and cooperation. The breakthrough came when Tom Bradley's investigators uncovered financial records showing that Earl Hutchins, Pete's brother, had been the real mastermind of the drug operation. For asking you to have faith when I wasn't entirely sure I deserved it myself. The evidence was overwhelming once they knew where to look. When Earl Hutchins was arrested trying to flee the country with over $10 million in drug money, his entire conspiracy collapsed. The day Jackson was exonerated, he walked out of the courthouse to find Maria and her children waiting for him. You needed someone to save your life, and I needed someone to show me that taking risks on people can lead to something beautiful. No cameras, no crowds, just a family that had believed in him when belief required courage. Sophia Santos had been accepted to every pre-med program she applied to, with full scholarships covering everything the trust fund didn't. All those years at the diner, all those cups of coffee, we were both there, but we weren't really there, you know? Exactly, but a partnership built on mutual respect, shared values, and the kind of deep friendship that comes from weathering storms together. Diego Santos was working with advanced mathematics tutors and showing signs of genuine genius-level aptitude. Maria realized that her life had taught her the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone isn't money or opportunity, but simply the chance to prove they're worthy of your faith. Just one. So what now? But in doing so, he found exactly what he'd been searching for his entire life. Not just healing for his wounds, but healing for his soul and a family that chose him not for his wealth, but for the man he proved himself to be when everything else was stripped away. "Now we finish what we started," Jackson said. "For what?" "For putting you and your children through this ordeal." Maria pulled into a driveway and turned to look at him. "I remember. I've been thinking about that. You knocked on the wrong door that night, but maybe it was exactly the right door for both of us." 6 months later, the Blackwood Foundation had distributed over $3 million in assistance to working families throughout Texas. And Maria Santos had transformed from a struggling waitress into one of the most respected community leaders in the region, overseeing programs that helped hundreds of families improve their lives with dignity and hope. Jackson had kept his promise to ask for nothing in return for his generosity, but something had grown between him and Maria anyway, not romance. Standing together at the Foundation's first annual dinner, watching Sophia give a speech about the importance of education and Diego demonstrate mathematical concepts to fascinated donors, Jackson turned to Maria. "Any regrets about opening your door that night?" Maria smiled, watching her children shine with confidence and possibility. "What's that?" "I regret that it took so long for us to really see each other." Jackson nodded, understanding completely. Sometimes we have to knock on the wrong door to find out where we really belong. As the evening wound down and families headed home with new hope and expanded possibilities, and sometimes, when you're brave enough to help a stranger, you end up saving yourself in the process. The cowboy had indeed knocked on the wrong door that stormy night.